He's one of my good friends. So we're going to talk about how education works. And I know a number of you are planning on, you've chosen education to be the field that you're going into. So I'm going to give you kind of a broad view of how some of the funding flows, because you hear things in school. You may not know kind of where it came from. So I'm going to kind of give you that overview, but we're going to get down to the school level, how things work. But I wanted to give you kind of an overview. So first of all, funding. So 90% of the funding in Utah comes from the state and from local sources. Only about 10% comes from the federal government. Some districts up to 12%. And that's all. I mean, you hear all this stuff about federal this and federal that and federal intrusion and federal, you just hear it all the time. The feds are just got their nose stuck in education. I mean, your program is funded through the federal government, VISTA is. And some of the programs, a lot of you work with special needs programs, and then a lot of you work in Title I schools. Title I schools get additional funding from the federal government. But on the big picture, it's only 10% of the funding. And most people don't know that. They think the feds have got their fingers in it. I'll have someone say, oh yeah, federal intrusion is the number one, that's the most important issue that people should be looking at. And I'm kind of going, gee, as a school board member, we haven't really discussed that for, I don't know, a year and a half. I mean, it isn't a big issue. It's the public makes it a bigger issue than it is. Okay, next slide. Okay, funding breakdown. Most of funding for education comes from your income tax. All of Utah's income tax goes toward the Unified School Fund. Some of it comes from a state property tax that was increased for the first time last year in 20 years, and local districts give some money to it. It goes into what we call, you'll hear WPU all the time, WPU. That's weighted pupil unit. Nice government, acronym, right? Weighted pupil unit. And what that is, that's kind of the way that the legislature funds. It says, okay, we're going to increase funding by this percent, and it's that weighted pupil unit that they're increasing. Because that's what you can spend on pretty much the districts can use to really run the district and run all the different programs they're doing. And that's and Utah's actually gets kudos nationally because we fund this way. So it's a very equalized funding because you're funded on a per pupil basis. So if you're a district that has 2,000 students, you get the funding for 2,000 students. If you have, like Davis School District, and we have 71,000 students, we get, so it's equalized. And this part of the funding is also very equalized. Richer districts get the same amount per pupil as poor districts. There's other funding that impacts how much money you have, so you are impacted whether you're a rich or a poor district, but basic funding across the board is equalized, and that doesn't happen in a lot of states. Some of you are from other states. In a lot of states, the education funding, there's some from the state, but then it goes through the county, and then the county gives it to the district. But if you're a really poor county, those schools may get a lot less funding than somewhere else. It's not equalized, and there actually are lawsuits now around the country because of that. Okay, next slide. So the Utah legislature sets the weighted pupil unit. That's basically if they were going to raise funding for education by 3% or whatever, that's where most of the money is going to. They fund some programs outside the weighted pupil unit. There's some programs that districts can opt into. Some of you have heard of the Beverly Sorensen Art program. That's something that's funded outside of the weighted pupil unit because not everybody does it. And so, so some people so those kind of programs are funded outside. And often they're funded with one-time funds. So the legislature has access to ongoing funds, and that's the money that they believe they'll have every year. So that's the kind of money you would use for salaries and ongoing programs. But they do have some one-time funds. So sometimes if there's a program, there's a pilot program, or like the Beverly Sorensen that people like, but it'll be funded on a year-to-year basis, depending on what the legislature wants to do. Okay? So this is how the funding works. Income tax goes to the education fund. And there's two funds. There's the education fund and the general fund. So the education fund used to just fund K-12 public education. 10 years ago, they passed a thing saying, we think public education includes universities. Okay? So that seemed, because it turns out that fund had gone pretty big. And so the legislature decided to change the definition of public ed to include higher ed. And that seemed kind of innocent at the time, seemed reasonable. It turns out that higher ed is also funded by the general fund. The general fund is mostly funded by sales tax, and that's what funds roads and like health and human services and health programs, kind of like everything else but education. Okay, and that having those two separate funds work pretty well. But now, because higher ed can be funded from both funds, the legislature uses higher ed as a siphoning place. So if they want to have more money for roads over out of the general fund, then they move some of the education fund, more education funding into higher ed, take general fund that was going to higher ed and put it into roads. You guys see how that works? And it's really hard to track. That's something that's going on right now. So sometimes you'll hear comments made about that education funded roads or something along that line. That's because this is happening. So it's good for you to know the structure and how it works. Okay, next slide. So basically, the legislature passes laws, and they say we want schools to do this and schools to do that, and then those laws are handed over to the State Office of Education, and the State Office of Education, and the money flows this way too. The legislature says this is how much money there is, the money flows to the State Office of Education, and then it flows to the local districts to spend in the way that the legislature determined it should be spent. Utah's a little unusual. Most state legislatures around the country during a legislative session might have 10 to 20 education bills. For some reason, the culture here, last year we had 160 at the Utah legislature. So it's just a whole different culture. So I was talking to the Speaker of the House, and was there for another issue, but as I was leaving, I said, it'd be lovely if we could cut down the number of education bills. He said, I know, but education is so important. Everybody wants to run a bill. I said, I think that you should have some way that they can earn brownie points for 4 or 5 of them signing on to the same bill. So we have fewer bills we have to. He's going, So I don't think anything will come of it, but it's always good to ask. Okay, next slide. So who decides how the money is spent? First of all, the legislature passes laws, and then the State Board of Education sets a statute. So they take the law, whatever legislation was passed, and sometimes those aren't written super clearly. I mean, there's some you read them and you go, I think this is what the legislator meant. But they have to take that and create the actual state law. And that's what people have to follow, is that's the way the State Board of Education sets that statute. And then the districts implement the programs that the legislature passed legislation about. Okay, next slide. So the school boards set all the policies for the district. So that's what school boards do. They set policy. They're not supposed to be mucking around in individual school business. Their policies must meet at a minimum the state statute. There are times districts will have more. Like graduation, the number of hours needed for graduation. There's a state level, which I think is 27 units. A lot of districts have a couple of more classes that they require students to take. So we have districts that for graduation, you need anywhere from like 27, I think the highest is 30 to graduate. But how often it's implemented is left up to how it's implemented is left up to the district. So each districts do things a little differently. Like in Davis, our counselors may do things differently than they do in Logan, or that they do in Cache, because every district implements them just a little bit differently. Okay. Oh, this is the timer? Yeah. The important timer. Okay, next slide. Okay. Am I doing this slide? Okay. So principals that are trained how to implement a program. Let's say a new personal finance curriculum. And then, so they're taught on how to do it. They say, oh, this is what the statute says, this is what you need to do. They take it back to their faculty. But then each teacher usually has flexibility in how they teach that curriculum. It's not when we say, first class, the first lesson is this. That's not, the state office is not near that prescriptive. It says these are the outcomes you want. These are the concepts we want taught. How those are taught is up to the district. So when you hear someone talk about i.e. the Common Core. The Common Core is not a curriculum. The Common Core are the standards that need to be met. They're just the standards. How you get to those standards is done by the district. Okay? So when people talk about the Common Core, they're talking, and a lot of the people talking about the Common Core don't know that. Don't know what I just told you. Okay? The Common Core is just standards. We want 5th grade teachers to be able to write a clear paragraph. There's standards. How you get there is the curriculum. The districts have their own curriculum.
Barbara, can you clarify something? Because I think we all in foreign schools have heard blah blah blah, Common Core is evil, Common Core is so horrible. Why are people feeling that way and saying that?
Okay. First of all, Common Core is not evil. All right. Common Core is actually quite a vigorous standards. Much more vigorous than when you guys were in school. It's more vigorous, especially in the early grades. It's exactly what people have been asking for. We want a more vigorous curriculum that gets our kids college ready. I mean, if you ask a parent, if you handed a parent some standards and just handed it to them and say, what do you think? Do you think this is reasonable for a 5th grader? Oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. I really like that one. I really like that one. And they would say they like it. You go, oh, this is the Common Core. Oh no, the Common Core is just really awful, And they'll sit there and tell you. The reason is, it's because there is a group of people who are I talked to you a little bit about the federal government intrusion into our lives, and they absolutely believe that the Common Core was driven by the federal government. It was not. The Common Core was actually started by the Governors Association. And the Governors Association really felt like they needed a vigorous curriculum and with kids moved from Minnesota to Utah to California, they were getting something similar in every state. And they all they really felt like their constituents wanted something that was more vigorous. So they actually started the Common Core and started the whole process of it being written, and it totally came from the Governors Association. It did not come from the federal government. Now later, the federal government recognized that it was a vigorous, quality curriculum, and so they started there was grants out there that were made available, huge grants that were made available, and they said you've got to have a vigorous curriculum to be able to apply for this money. And so since a lot of states didn't quite meet what the vigorous standard was, but the Common Core did, a number of states said, okay, we'll do Common Core. Well, as soon as you had that federal connection, people who don't like the federal government intruding in education immediately said the federal government has wrote this, generated it, and we don't want it.
So just so that I'm clear, Common Core dictates where the students get, but not how they get there?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yep. Okay, Common Core is the standard that you want to meet. How you get there is up to the district. And sometimes it's even up to the teacher. So that's kind of where the negativity came from. And then so a lot of people are still wallowing around in that. And then we started doing, you need to test. Okay, so you've got a curriculum, you've got some standards, and you need to test to see whether the kids are meeting the standard. So we started working with a huge consortium of, 7 or 8 states. We had probably the majority of people on the committee and started developing a test to test the Common Core. And our state school board decided that only Utahns should be writing the test for Utah kids. And so even though we'd already spent a couple $1 million on that process, they decided to pull away from it, and that's when they came up with the SAGE test you hear about. And the SAGE test has been under, I don't know if you guys have ever sat down and tried to take the SAGE test. I mean, it's one of, it's adaptive testing, so you get in there and you answer a question. If you get it right, it moves you down this road. If you don't get it right, it takes you down this road. Then if you get that one right, it takes you down this road. So you have to have a huge number of questions for that kind of a platform. I mean, 2,500 questions for like the 5th grade stage test. I mean, just a huge number of questions. And so there's been a little bit of, and we've had parent review committees, but there's, some really conservative parents who don't want questions about certain things, and there's a few of those in the SAGE, and so they want to throw the whole test out because of that. Huge pressure on the State Board of Education to get rid of the SAGE. All the directors around the state who are around testing really would like to keep it for a few more years so we can find out how it works. It gives teachers so much information. It's an awesome test because of that.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. What's the benefit of like that adaptive?
Because you can take a student as far as they can go. So it turns out the end of level test just kind of tested you on, did you learn the stuff you were supposed to learn in 8th grade? You didn't know how far this student could go. And so with the SAGE testing, you can really see, when it comes to, math issues, this kid's way up here, language arts is only here, but it takes the student as far as they can go. And it gives the teachers a lot of information. So they have decided to, pretty much statewide, they're not going to give the SAGE test in 11th grade anymore. They're just going to use the ACT test. But anyway, that's kind of where the negativity comes from. It comes from people who are concerned about federal intrusion into our schools, which is actually pretty minimal, and they really had nothing to do with the Common Core. But if you have a discussion with one of these people, they probably won't believe you. I mean, that's just the way it's being presented. So anyway, so on the school level, you really have a lot of flexibility in how you implement the core. Okay, next. Okay. Now we're going to talk. First of all, I want to talk about one kind of funding that I didn't talk about. How many of you have heard of school trust lands? Okay, all right. All around the state, there are, when we became a state, the federal government came in and identified thousands and thousands of acres, millions of acres around the state that were school trust lands. So if you looked at a map of Utah, when we became a state, there's little dots all over the state. And it was done by a formula. And any money that is made off of those pieces of land are supposed to go into a trust fund. Okay? And that trust fund is supposed to be used for public education. Well, in Utah, those little pieces of land were kind of misused for a number of years, almost 100, and we didn't make much money from them. And so they were treated like state lands. State lands are like the lands that belong to the Utah, to the forests and all that kind of stuff. They were kind of treated the same way. They weren't treated like they should make money. So we lost millions and millions. Like there's some land that was basically sold to someone for grazing amount, even though they knew that there was coal underneath. And that's cost the Utah school system about $20 million every year because of that misuse. So there was a lot of misuse over 100 years. Finally, some people who noticed that was happening got involved politically and actually got a new state department called School Trust Lands
Administration.
Administration, SITLA. School Trust Lands. We just call it SITLA. Anyway, was created to literally oversee the school trust lands and make sure that they are being used for the best possible use. And so we've gone from there only being $15 million in this trust. But we had $15 million. This is 12 years ago. We had $15 million in our trust fund. New Mexico, who had about the same number of trust lands and probably more arid land than we do, they had, what did they have? I think it was like $300 million in their trust. We had 15. They had 300. It had been so misused. And so we finally got this new agency created, and their sole purpose is to protect them, but keep their value, and then if there's a good opportunity to increase their value or whatever, that's what their job is. And that money flows differently than other money. That money goes into a trust, and it has to follow trust law as far as you don't spend the corpus of the trust. You just can use the interest and dividends that come off. And those interest and dividends are distributed directly to schools. So the legislature doesn't have a say. Well, the legislature created the law that made it go, that it goes to the school, and it says that it has to be for the most critical academic issues at your school. The most critical academic needs is the verbiage. And it goes directly to schools. So the legislature doesn't really have a say about how it's spent, except that they kind of define the terms. The State Office of Education doesn't really, they get to just say whether you're meeting that definition. It flows to your district, but directly out to the school, and the district keeps none of it. It goes straight to the schools. And your school community council is in charge of how that spends. So some of you are involved with that. In fact, some of you, your programs get money from your school community council to help support the program that you're doing. So that's money that the school community council can say, these are the most critical needs, whether it's reading or math, or it can be applied, a certain amount, 20% can be applied to things like attendance and those kind of things. But they get to identify what that need is and how they're going to try and solve that need. And every school's different. Some schools hire some TAs, some schools buy computers to supplement their writing program. It's whatever their need is, and they use that money for that. But the money is not small. The money is $35,000 areas per student, up to some of the big high schools is $100,000. So it's not little money. It's good money. Yep.
And I would say probably 75% of you as VISTA members are directly funded through trust funds.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a huge thing.
For you, that means your school has determined that you are worth purchasing or sharing the cost to meet those most critical academic needs at the school.
So it's pretty significant. So that means the school community council, which is made up of majority parents, teacher, and the principal are on there, that when they were looking at how to solve some of the issues in their school, they choose to invest in you. That's a huge comment. And so it's good for you to know where that money comes from and kind of who were the decision makers behind it. And then they had to turn in a plan. So the way this works is each school creates a plan on how they're going to spend their school trust fund funds, and that is sent to the school board, and the local school board approves it. This is the only funding in the state that's done that way. The only money in the state that bypasses the state office. The state office does review them and make sure that they're meeting those definitions, and if the school's not, then they'll get back to the district and say, we got this one school that's kind of, they're buying football uniforms, doesn't fit, and we really want to protect that money and spend it the right way, because we don't want the legislature coming in and saying, they're not doing it right, we're going to take it away. So we really protect that money. So anyway, that's a funding source that's out there that you've heard about. That's how it gets there. And it's it is the only funding that goes that way and has that much local control. Okay, how things really work in the school. Okay, who's the most important person in your school that you should be best friends with?
I have that answer.
Who is it, huh? Who is it?
Well, at my school, it's the secretary.
Okay?
She does everything. knows
Right.
everything.
You're right. The secretary. I don't care what you're doing. You want that secretary to be your best friend, and you want that secretary to see you as a hard worker, as someone who's willing to jump in, kind of help if you need, and if they see you as that kind of person, the word's going to get spread. Because they'll see a teacher and go, oh yeah, so-and-so is pretty good at, and you don't want them to take away from your VISTA work, but you want them to be aware of what you're doing, when you're doing it. You don't want to just go into school and kind of hide wherever they've got you working with students or whatever. You want to make sure that secretary knows what you're doing, kind of, oh, I work with this kid, you tell them about it, because the word gets spread. That's just a reality, okay? Now, some of you work with several schools, and so you're kind of running in and out. And for you, it's even more important that you stick your head in the office and you say, hi, I'm here for about an hour and a half, I'm going to be da-da-da, I've got about 7 kids I'm going to be working with, just let them know, say, anything you need, let me know. And you need to connect with that office when you come in. Don't just slither by, which is, kind of, you've got kids coming in about 3 minutes, you want to get down there, you want to start working with them, but stick your head in the office. And you should be when you come in, but at least when you're going out, and become part of that school family. Okay, so because they've got this great resource. You're coming into the school to work with certain kids, you're a great resource, and that secretary needs to know that that's happening. And it's just a fact of life. So it's really important that you get to know the secretary. That seems silly, but it's, if the secretary perceives that you're a slacker, or you're just sitting in your whatever, and you're not really working with people and not doing things, someone comes in, they go, what is that, what does that person do? Well, I don't really know, they're not around, and that's all it takes. That's all it takes. And you're kind of dead in the water. So, and then of course your principal. You want to communicate. This morning, that whole discussion was you need to communicate with your principal about your hours. That's what we were talking about this morning. But you need to communicate with them about what you're doing. Well, this week this is what I'm getting done, because they're very busy and they've got so many things on their plate. You can't wait for them to start the conversation. You need to stick your head in and say, this is what I got going this week, and just let them know.
When's the best time to do that? Because they are really busy. I never want to intrude and take up their valuable time. And so how would you suggest going about?
What level are you?
High school.
High school?
Mm-hmm.
High school principals are in and out, but if they're just sitting at their desk for a minute, just stick your head in. Just stick your head in and say, I just wanted to let you know, this is kind of what I've been doing this week, and next week this is what I've got going. Just wanted to give you a heads up. And, oh, thank you, And they may have a question for you, but you've got to become a presence in that school.
Okay.
I know this sounds silly, but there's a bathroom in where our office is at the school I work at, so I always make sure I go to that office so I can talk to the secretaries and make sure that they know what I'm doing. So, sounds weird, but
No.
The bathroom is an excuse to go in there and talk. It works.
Whatever it takes to make sure that you're noticed. And it's just, I say that school has chosen to invest in you, and you need to be seen as an asset in that school. And you may even have a slow day and you don't feel like you're getting that much done that day. But if the secretary's, you stop in at the office, you talk about something and whatever, it can help in those situations. And then of course you want to be, really let your principal know what you're doing. Then if you have another supervisor, you need to, make sure that they know what you're doing. Now, a number of you guys are planning on going into education. In Utah, the education network is pretty tight. Okay? I know all kinds of people in Cache and Logan, Weber, Alpine, Provo. I know people down in San Juan. I know people in Washington School District. I know people all over the state. Okay? That's just me. Other educators are just as connected. So if you're planning going to education, this VISTA opportunity that you're experiencing this year is a great opportunity to do some networking and to kind of show who you are. Because the principal that's at your school right now, principals get moved. In elementary, in Davis School District, we move our elementary principals just about every 5 years. And junior high, maybe every 7, we aren't very good about moving senior high principals. But they do get moved. Counselors get moved. Secretaries get moved. So this is an excellent job for you to just kind of network, because you never know. The principal you're working with right now, by the time you finish your schooling and you decide to go get a job, may be at the school that you're applying for. So this is a really good opportunity for you to kind of network. If there's teachers or there's counselors, and you think you're going to work with the counselors, get to know the counselors, get to know your principal, because it could later be a really positive thing. So remember, I was a VISTA at your school. Oh, that's right, you did this and this, and it's a foot in the door. So that's kind of how things work within a school. I can't underestimate the secretary thing. I had a meeting with the Logan School District Superintendent just before you guys were having lunch today, and I mentioned that I was doing this training, and I said that I was going to emphasize the importance of secretaries. He said, oh, yeah. Because he'd been a principal. A secretary can make or break you. If you're a principal and you've got one that isn't doing what they need to do or isn't being good with the public. So, any questions or you wonder how things work, or you've heard an education term you don't know. They keep saying it, like FTE. Does everyone know what an FTE is? It's a full-time equivalent. Basically, a school is assigned so many full-time equivalent people. So 2 part-time people can equal a full-time equivalent, but the money flows to a school based on a full-time equivalent. So that's an FTE, so that's a thing you might hear. But we didn't get that FTE that we wanted. That's what they're talking about. So they're going to have a shortage of personnel in the program.
2 tips for working with secretaries and principals that I've learned over the years. Number 1 is that every principal has a pet project. Find out what that pet project is and take some kind of interest in it, and you'll always have something to talk about. And number 2, every secretary has a favorite drink. Find out what that is. And bring in a nice big
Whatever it is.
drink. Those are the 2 biggest things I've learned.
Does it?
I just said your mind.
Yeah, you probably see that.
Diet Coke is the standard.
It's pretty standard.
It is the standard.
But it goes a long way, and those secretaries really too are the people who will determine, like, you're doing an event, like our event we just did with the Logan Family Center.
Mhm.
Because I knew those secretaries and principals was able to call and say, hey, or the Vistas were in Jason Parker's case, but able to say, hey, we got this thing going on, can you slip it in that hall call, can we slip a note home? They are totally the ones who will
They're the gatekeepers.
determine that and do you little favors if they let you, so.
Mhm. They're the gatekeepers. That's what they're hired to be a gatekeeper in a way. They're hired to keep, keep things calm. So they're not bothering the principal. They're, try and take care of as many things as they can. But they're also the nucleus of the rumor mill. Right? Yeah.
I have a question that might be helpful. So how would you suggest VISTA members who are at schools or actually within districts or whatever, how would you suggest they get involved in the professional development process for schools? Because, they'll do like a PD or like something
Yes.
like that. What would you think would be
I think
appropriate?
I actually think, the most schools kind of develop a professional development plan for the year. In fact, that's actually the school community council used to be part of that. And, that can be part of your talk with the principal. Just say, I'm trying to learn as much as I can. If you're doing professional development around professional learning communities or around how to read the data or, classroom practices, I would love to be involved. Is that possible? And just let them know, because they may not know you have any interest. And there's probably no problem at all for having that day and you being in there. None at all. And I can't think of hardly any topic that would be covered in those professional development that wouldn't be beneficial to you. I mean, it might be talking about reading, how to teach reading, but any of those are really beneficial with what you're doing.
So
To know some of the things that teachers are doing, because they'll also talk about the challenges that structure or whatever is supposed to help with, and so.
Yeah, and once they trust you and of your judgment, of course, they will eventually maybe be willing to send you to some of like the district-wide PD opportunities that they have as a representative of the school. We had a few of those opportunities.
Yeah.
It was helpful. That's because we expressed interest, genuine interest in it, and we asked, where can we help? We're here to learn. What can we do? What's coming up?
Yep.
So you do have to be a little proactive, but
Yep.
eventually the rest of it
You really have to
comes.
be a can-do kind of person and go in and but if they're doing something around technology or something and it's useful for you to know it, they can make that opportunity available to you. So.
And I was just telling your key, we just had like a week full of professional development, and it was around PLCs, and Joe Kidemi came and stuff, and I was actually I was wondering if I should sit in on it, and so I just asked the principal, I just suggested it, and he was like, I didn't even think of that, and he was like, it would actually be really beneficial for you to be there, and then he was like, we should actually tell the intern and stuff too, so it helped him realize that we wanted to be involved in that, so just making that suggestion is really good.
Yeah, like I said, they put a lot on their plate, if, they're thinking teacher, classroom, and you go, if I be part of that, and that's a great idea. So reach out, make your you'd like to know more, let your principal know that. And I think in most situations that they will be just great with you sitting in on those.
And sometimes it's seen as just helpful, because sometimes they can't go, or they have something else to do, so they're like, you said you wanted to go, would you be
Yeah.
interested in going? And it's just a way to be
Yep.
helpful,
I mean, years ago, I was very involved in my children's elementary school and worked part-time at the school. And there was a number of times that the principal sent me to different things just because she knew I'd bring it back. And so, anything else? Well, thank you. We're so lucky to have you in our schools. And what an extra benefit you are to the schools, because the teachers can't do everything. There are students who need extra help. The schools need someone who isn't just focused on the classroom, focused on what they're doing there. You're kind of outside of that. You can see the big picture, some things that need to happen, and that's just a real gift to the schools. So we're thrilled to have you in there. So thank you.